Welcome to the Pardes channel. Today we explain Prophet Samuel 1, chapter 3 in a clear and simple way, step by step. So let's just dive right into this incredible chapter. It's a story where a young boy hears a voice in the dead of night, a voice that literally ends up changing the entire history of Israel. Here's our roadmap for this explainer. 1. Context and the night calls. 2. Understanding God's heavy prophecy. 3. Delivering the hard truth. 4. Samuel established as prophet. 5. Practical life lessons. And finally, 6. A quick chapter recap. All right, let's get into it. So, starting with section 1, context and the night calls. Let's set the stage. We're beginning with verse 1, which tells us, the boy Samuel ministered before the Lord under Eli. In those days, the word of the Lord was rare. There were not many visions. Let's break this down simply. We've got a young boy, Samuel. He's actively serving and learning under the aging high priest, Eli. But notice this absolutely crucial detail that sets up our whole story. Divine visions and direct words from God, they were incredibly rare at this time. Essentially, God was silent. Moving right along to verses 2 and 3, the text says, one night Eli, whose eyes were becoming so weak that he could barely see, was lying down in his usual place. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was lying down in the temple of the Lord, where the ark of God was. Just picture this physical scene for a second. It's nighttime. The old priest, Eli, is resting. His failing eyesight is this really subtle detail that highlights not just his old age, but maybe even the spiritual dimness of the era, Meanwhile, young Samuel is sleeping nearby in the sacred space, right before the ceremonial lamp goes out for the night. Now, let's define a couple of simple terms here so we're all on the same page. When the verse mentions the temple of the Lord, it's actually referring to the Tabernacle. That was the large, semi-permanent tent structure located in the city of Shiloh, basically the center of worship before the permanent temple was built in Jerusalem. And the Ark of God, or the Ark of the Covenant, was the sacred chest holding the tablets of the law. It represented the physical, tangible manifestation of God's presence among the Israelites. And Samuel, he is sleeping mere steps away from this incredibly holy object. All right, verses 4 and 5 bring us right to the action. Then the Lord called Samuel. Samuel answered, "Here I am." And he ran to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called me." But Eli said, "I did not call. Go back and lie down." So he went and lay down. So God calls out to Samuel for the very first time. But look at how Samuel reacts. He's just a kid living with an old, nearly blind priest who might need some help in the middle of the night. It makes total sense that Samuel assumes the human voice he hears is Eli. So, like a good student, he dutifully jumps out of bed and runs to his master. Then, in verses 6 and 7, it happens again. Again, the Lord called Samuel. And Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called me." "My son," Eli said gently, "I did not call. Go back and lie down." Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord. The word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. Notice how tender Eli is here. He calls him my son and just sends him back to bed. But verse 7 is vital for us to grasp. It clarifies that Samuel didn't yet know the Lord experientially. Sure, he knew about God, he served in the tabernacle, but he had never personally received a direct prophetic word from God before this very night. Notice how this builds up. For the third time, God calls, and Samuel once again runs to Eli. But this time, Eli's spiritual understanding finally kicks in. He realizes, wait a minute, the Lord is calling the boy. So Eli gives Samuel some exact instructions. He says, if the voice returns, say, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." And then comes the climax. God comes and stands there calling out, "Samuel, Samuel," just like before. And for this fourth call, the boy answers directly, following Eli's instructions perfectly. Moving to section 2, understanding God's heavy prophecy. This is where things take a serious turn. Verse 11 delivers this incredibly powerful opening statement from God. And the Lord said to Samuel, "See, I am about to do something in Israel that will make the ears of everyone who hears of it tingle." Imagine being a young boy and hearing this as your very first message from the Creator. The phrase, "make the ears tingle," it's such a visceral way of expressing absolute shock and horror. The news God is about to share is so catastrophic, so earth-shattering, that just hearing about it is going to cause a physical reaction of disbelief and pure fear. God continues in verses 12 and 13, and he gets very specific. "At that time, I will carry out against Eli everything I spoke against his family from beginning to end. For I told him that I would judge his family forever because of the sin he knew about. His sons made themselves contemptible, and he failed to restrain them." Right here, we have the clear why behind this judgment. You see, Eli's sons were also Christ serving in the tabernacle. But they had been committing terrible, contemptible sins. The judgment falls squarely on Eli because, as their father and as the high priest in charge, he knew exactly what they were doing, and he failed to stop them. He completely lacked the firm discipline that his sacred office required. Verse 14 finalizes this terrible decree. Therefore, I swore to the house of Eli, the guilt of Eli's house will never be atoned for by sacrifice or offering. Let's make sure we understand the literal meaning of these terms. In the tabernacle system, an atonement or a sacrifice was the method God provided for covering up or seeking forgiveness for sins. But God is declaring a severe, absolute finality right here. The sins of Eli's house have crossed a line of such blatant disrespect for the holy things that standard animal sacrifices and grain offerings, they just aren't going to fix it anymore. The judgment is locked in. This brings us to section 3, delivering the hard truth. This is the morning after the vision. Verse 15 says, Samuel lay down until morning and then opened the doors of the house of the Lord. He was afraid to tell Eli the vision. Notice the incredible restraint and obedience of Samuel here. I mean, he just had a direct, terrifying conversation with God, yet he just waits in his bed until sunrise, and then he gets up and goes right back to his normal, everyday chores. He physically opens the doors of the tabernacle just like he always does. But inside, he is carrying this heavy, paralyzing fear of having to tell his mentor, Eli, this dreadful prophecy of doom. Well, Eli forces the issue in verses 16 and 17. Eli calls him over and asks, "What was it he said to you? Do not hide it from me. May God deal with you, be it ever so severely, if you hide from me anything he told you." Remember, Eli might be an old man, but he is still the high priest, and he uses a very firm, formal curse formula here to ensure Samuel doesn't try to protect his feelings. Eli is demanding the absolute, unvarnished truth from the boy, no matter how much it might hurt to hear. Verse 18 shows us the outcome. So Samuel told him everything, hiding nothing from him. Then Eli said, "He is the Lord, let him do what is good in his eyes." Samuel demonstrates remarkable bravery here, doesn't he? He tells his master every single devastating detail. And Eli's response? It's incredibly profound in its simplicity. He doesn't argue, he doesn't make excuses, and he definitely doesn't get angry at Samuel. Instead, he demonstrates this humble, quiet acceptance of God's sovereign will and righteous judgment over his family. Let's move to section 4. Samuel established as prophet. We're looking at Samuel's growth now. Verse 19 tells us, "The Lord was with Samuel as he grew up, and he let none of his words fall to the ground." I just love that phrase. The simple meaning behind "let none of his words fall to the ground" is that every single prophecy or message Samuel spoke on behalf of God came entirely true. It's like an arrow hitting its target dead center rather than falling uselessly into the dirt. Samuel's words proved completely accurate, which fully validated his status. Verse 20 continues, "And all Israel from Dan to Beersheba recognized that Samuel was attested as a prophet of the Lord." Now this phrase, "from Dan to Beersheba," was used back then to describe the absolute boundaries of the land. Dan was way up in the extreme north, and Beersheba was down in the deep south. So this simple definition just means that literally everyone across the entire nation of Israel came to understand and accept Samuel's authority as a genuine prophet. We conclude our text walkthrough with verse 21. "The Lord continued to appear at Shiloh, and there he revealed himself to Samuel through his word." This beautifully wraps up the chapter by contrasting it perfectly with how it began. Remember back in verse 1 how visions were rare and God's word was incredibly scarce? Well, now, because of Samuel's faithful listening, that drought is completely over. God is continually revealing himself and speaking to his people again through his new prophet, right there in the tabernacle at Shiloh. All right, section 5, practical life lessons. Let's talk about applying the text. Here are 3 key takeaways for us. First, listen actively for guidance. Samuel literally said, "Speak, for your servant is listening." We too need to cultivate a quiet readiness to learn and be guided by truth, instead of always being the ones doing the talking. Second, have the courage to speak hard truths. It absolutely terrified Samuel to tell Eli the devastating news, but he didn't hide the facts. True integrity means delivering honest messages, even when it's super uncomfortable. And third, accept responsibility for your family's actions. Eli failed to restrain his sons, and the consequences were dire. This really reminds us that true leadership and love sometimes require firm discipline and setting boundaries for those under our care. And finally, section 6, chapter recap. Let's summarize 1 Samuel 3. To summarize, the young boy Samuel was serving in Shiloh during a major spiritual dry spell where visions were rare. God broke that silence by calling out to Samuel 4 distinct times in the middle of the night. During that powerful encounter, God revealed a severe, irreversible judgment on Eli's house because of Eli's failure to discipline his corrupt sons. Come morning, Samuel found the courage to honestly deliver that heavy news to his mentor, and as a result of his faithfulness, Samuel grew up to become the universally recognized prophet for all the people of Israel. So, as we reflect on this explainer, ask yourself, when life gets loud and complicated, are you cultivating a quiet space to simply say, "Speak, I am listening"? Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.